We did it.
Yeah, thank you. I think there were so many people popping in with the comments, which I'm so excited about.
Yeah.
We've got many people joining us this morning, but for the sake of time, let's go ahead and jump right into our discussion. Jim, I don't think you need an introduction with my audience, but just for the sake of letting everyone know a couple of facts about you. I think most people are familiar with me. I work with Proverbs 31 Ministries, and I love taking theology and therapy and bringing those two worlds together. And so today our conversation is around healthy relationships. How do we pursue those things that will help us move in our relationships from what starts off oftentimes in our marriage relationships or our significant other relationships, whether you're dating or pursuing marriage, starts off in romance and then over time shifts to routine. And so what are those things within our routines that we can make sure to weave into our relationships so that we can pursue health? Now, obviously, I'm describing romantic relationships there, but even in our relationships with our parents, our children, our friendships, a lot of these things do apply. So Jim Kress is my personal counselor. He has a long string of credentials. So Jim, maybe just mention a couple of your credentials and we're going to jump right into our conversation today.
My favorite one is I am the pastor of the First Nazametha Baptist-Costal Seventh-day Orthodox Lutheran non-denominational Church of Our Lady of Perpetual Trauma. Does that one work?
That sounded a little bit like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. So thank you for that.
We got to have fun. I noticed in the comment last week, one of the comments, and it made my day. They said, you and Lysa really, you guys have fun, even though it was clinical and therapeutic. And I said, yeah, this works too hard to not have fun. So I'm a licensed professional counselor, actually also a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I am an ordained pastor, went to seminary, and just love walking with people in their stories. That's what I do, is just trying to get stories with good endings. That's what I'm after.
That's great, Jim. Thank you so much. So last week, I had my makeup done, my hair freshly washed. I would just like to acknowledge this week, neither of those are true.
Well, but I did mine.
Well, good.
So,
I'm so glad. Did you powder your forehead and fix your hair today?
Obviously not.
Okay. Well, to me, this is a no makeup Saturday morning discussion. And so if that's where you are today, grab a cup of coffee, get a piece of paper and a pen, and let's get started. Jim, let's talk first about, because I'm a notes person, so I want things organized in our discussion. So I have, along with you in our discussion, we've identified 4 things to pursue in healthy relationships. Obviously, there are many more things, and maybe we can list some of those other things toward the end of our conversation.
Right.
But first, I want to talk about freedom to express expectations. So this is, if you're taking notes, list this as healthy relationship indication number 1, freedom to express expectations.
Yes.
So when you're talking about expectations, there are really 2 categories that start this conversation. We have realistic expectations and unrealistic expectations. Mm-hmm. Now, here's where things get a little complicated. In the category of your realistic expectations, you may absolutely be right that those should be realistic expectations. But in a relationship, there's always 2 people. And this is why it's important to have conversations around expectations in moments that aren't heated arguments, because we want to make sure that we're having honest, logical conversations around, for us in our relationship, what are realistic expectations. Because oftentimes the frustration in relationships come where I think something's realistic, a realistic expectation, but you either are not aware of it, it's gone unexpressed, so I haven't made you aware of it, right, or you don't agree that it's a realistic expectation. And that unmet expectation in me can really cause a lot of angst, a lot of behind the scenes grumbling in my own mind, a lot of wear and tear on me, diminishing the value of this relationship because I have an expectation that I have deemed it's fully realistic, but when it goes unmet, it creates a hardship in my heart. So we have realistic expectations, unrealistic expectations, but in those two categories, if you and I aren't talking about it, then we have potential conflict because we've never had an honest way to express those and come together in determining for our relationship what is realistic. So in this, I recommend people have a conversation where you sit down and you put your cards on the table. Here are some expectations that I feel are very realistic for us. Help me understand what your thoughts are about this so that we can take this list and divide it out into realistic expectations and unrealistic expectations. So when we have that conversation, Jim, what's some of your advice? Because immediately I can hear these thoughts of resistance that say, well, that's awesome, but most of what I expect in the relationship, when I sit down to try to talk about it, either I can't get the words out right and the other person receives it as criticism, or the other person in the relationship thinks every one of my expectations is ridiculous. And so I start to hear all of this resistance when we say have this conversation. So what's your best advice so that we can properly identify what are some realistic expectations in a relationship?
Well, thank you, Lisa. And one of the things I heard as you were describing that was you're on one side of the table, and I do this literally in my office where I have a table I set up, and I have people, I'll say it's time to put your cards on the table. If they're married, I call it the MRI, where the marriage really is. And we're not, y'all say naming, not blaming. We're just going to put the cards on the table. They put them upside down, literally, and then one at a time, they turn them over and we talk about them. So if you have a reasonable expectation on your side, the other person may have and meet that same expectation, feeling it's unreasonable. So now you've got a conflict going into it already that we know also that expectations often are premeditated resentments. Expectations are premeditated resentments. So do I have a desire to share this expectation with you, or watch, do I have a demand? You better see it.
Okay, so that's a very good consideration for us when we're talking about expectations, so that they don't become premeditated. What did you call them?
Premeditated resentments. I'm there. You better do this. And behind it too is in the marital research, they're called bids. It says BIDS. You're putting a bid on something like on eBay or something. I put a bid out. Unanswered bids are one of the biggest factors that will harm any relationship. Friends, you and your children, you and a spouse or partner, the idea that I need this from you. And by the way, flip it and also don't need this from you. Because expectations have two sides. I need this and I really need this to happen. And oh, by the way, I need that to not happen. So unanswered bids in a relationship. Could we talk? Could we get a little bit of time? Would you listen to me? Could we be sexual together? Could we pray together? Could we take a walk? Could we watch a movie together? And someone either ignores it or just blows it off. So unanswered bids in these expectations is huge.
So is there a better word to use? Like when I say freedom to express expectations, is there a better word to use than expectations?
I like the word longing.
Okay.
If you can't fight with me there, you could. But I say, you know what? And I'm using that word as a nomenclature, as a framing. You know what I long for from you? It's a word that's in Scripture, obviously. So I long for this, or desire, or I'd like to talk about this, or I'd like to address this issue. Of course, it's an expectation. It's okay. But our words frame our reality. Our words frame a reality. So there's a way that when I hear the word expectation, I already, even in this conversation, find myself a little bit on the defensive.
See, this is so helpful. This right here is why we like to process these things with a counselor, right? Okay, so freedom to express expectations, just the word expectation may bring with it some sense of premeditated demands. And
Yes.
so instead of using the word expectations, we can say longings. So then we can reframe it. So here I want to have a conversation around some of my longings in this relationship. What's another word that's more safe than expectations?
Well, it's a word we see all day long. It's going on right here below us in social media. Like, is now a good time? We went through this a little bit the last time, and as you and I have talked, harken back to 10 episodes of Therapy and Theology. Folks, if you haven't seen that, and would someone type that in the comments below, Therapy and Theology. They're great, high-quality videos of that on YouTube. And we talked about a number of these things there.
And for those of you who are wondering what Jim's referring to, Proverbs 31 Ministries, the ministry that I work with, we have a podcast. So you can go to Proverbs 31 Ministries podcast. And in that podcast, we have a whole series of podcasts that are also videos as well. So you can listen to it audio. You can also watch it through video, where Jim, myself, and Joel Mutamale, Director of Theological Research at Proverbs 31 Ministries, where we come together and tackle different topics according to the Bible and according to counseling. I think you'll really find that helpful. But let's get back to number one, freedom to express what I like or what I desire. A longing in this relationship.
And with the four horsemen, and if we get to, I know we'll get to eventually, the Healthy Conversations contract. As I said to you, you and I were talking earlier this morning, there are 5 broadcasts. I'm a 40-year radio TV broadcaster. I'm going to use the word broadcast, folks. There are 5 weeks of broadcast on half the topics we're talking about in one Instagram Live. So we'll try to get to these things. Honey, I'd like to talk about something. Is now a good time? We talked about last time about blood sugar, timing, rest, pressure. Is now a good time to talk about this? And then I'd like you to hear me. It's a bid. I'd like to talk about this. And it's a desire and a longing of something you'd like to see change, improved. I'd like in a relationship, one of my things I tell couples is, it comes from a friend of mine in Tennessee. If find stuff that works in a relationship, do a little bit more of that. And find stuff that doesn't work in a relationship, do a lot less of that.
Gosh, so, honey, Jim, that is such good advice right there.
Yeah, it's simple too.
Okay, so when we have this conversation, let's say I put a card on the table, and if it's easier for you to write these things out, then give your spouse or your whoever you're having the conversation with, give them time to also write down some of their longings, desires, what they like to see more of in a relationship. If it's helpful to write those things out ahead of time, then you could literally bring 3x5 cards and lay those cards on the table. So what do we do when I put something on the table that I think is a realistic longing and my spouse says it is not realistic for me?
Okay, so a couple of thoughts. One, in some of the marital research, we find that there are probably 3 to 5 and maybe more disagreements in a relationship at any level, including marriage, 3 to 5 disagreements that will never be settled. They are often idiosyncratic. Someone sees something one way, you see something the other way. Not probably as stark as in our political world these days, where there's so much polarization, but someone says, their style of relating, their Enneagram number, they're a morning person, they're a night person. They like to talk about the old biblical metaphor. Some people are the babbling brook, babble, babble, babble. The other people are the Dead Sea. They just don't want to talk about it, right? So you've got to understand those things, that sometimes you're coming and part of the expectation is, I just don't want to talk about this. No, everybody's seen that. I don't want to talk about this. So to frame it up, would you be willing to at least hear me? And hopefully if they could mirror back, I want to come in why I say desire, not demand. I want to come in and say my truth and then give them some space so that if they don't see it the way I do, I don't want to come off high and mighty and say, I'm right, you're wrong. So I have to have almost the hypothesis that here's my expectation and desire, and then give them the space to see, even if the Holy Spirit reveals to them, you know what, there's an issue here. And you could say, honey, would you be willing, I know we don't see eye to eye, would you be willing to at least pray about this? And then obviously, if it's a big enough issue, if we can't see eye to eye, let's sit down with another couple, a mutual friend, or a therapist or pastor and say, we're kind of stuck. they just won't even hear me and engage me on said issue. Because if they don't hear it, they're not going to hear you.
I think this is so good. So I think the way that we frame these conversations is crucial. And someone left a comment just a minute ago that said, the minute that I start this conversation, I'll hear, oh, I get it. I don't do anything right. And so is there a way, and
That's
also
contempt.
I like
That's
what you
contempt and defensiveness from last week's The Four Horsemen.
Right.
Contempt and, yeah, right.
Okay.
That's sarcasm.
And for those of you who want to watch last week, you can go to my Instagram. I put it in my main feed. You'll see a split screen with like this part of my head and then the top part of Jim's head. Click on that. And when you do, it'll start playing, and then eventually it'll kick over to the longer video. So you'll be able to see that. But how do we frame these conversations? Because I like what you said right from the very beginning, saying, I'm not making a demand here. I want to express a desire. And so do we go ahead and say, let me identify some things that I really see you doing right now before we even get into some longings that I have in my heart, and what do you have to give in regards to this longing? Like, how do we frame this conversation up so right from the beginning it's not seen as criticism, and that we don't start getting defensive right away?
I love the way you've set that up, and it's important. Again, back to some relationship research that shows it takes 3 to probably 5 or more full tilt affirmations of you to cover one critique. So the idea is my relational bank account with many people is already in the red. I'm not getting any stimulus check there. We're in trouble relationally with the relational capital. We're in trouble. So if I come in and most of the time I come and say, we talk about this and that, but I really want to kind of really engage you when I've got a problem with you. So I'm already in a deficit. So I like what you said to start with. I already know that some people are going to think this sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit, or it's going to sound like some satire humor to say, I would like to praise you and affirm you. It's true. So that idea of gratitude, and say, can we talk, and say, by the way, thank you for making the time. I'd like to talk about this, and let me say a few things of what I'm grateful for about you.
I think that's really helpful to start a conversation like this. And then when we then get into, here's a longing or desire that I have, is there any value, Jim, in breaking that longing down? Like if I say, I have a longing that every night when I go to bed, that there are no dishes in the sink. Okay, this is very basic, but I may or may not have just had this conversation last night with my
You're getting to the good stuff now. This is the real stuff, isn't it?
Okay, when romance becomes routine.
Come on.
Right? So I just had this conversation last night because I really like to go to bed with a clean sink and wake up with a clean sink. I don't know why that's one of my things, but it is. It's really important.
Isn't that your Enneagram 8 wing coming out or not?
I don't know.
It's just healthy. You're just being healthy.
Okay. Thank you. So last night I stood in my kitchen. All my family was gathering around, and I wanted soup for dinner. So I ate soup for dinner. But then as I finished my soup, I washed my bowl. I put it in the dishwasher. And the rest of my family all wanted hamburgers for dinner. So they were making hamburgers after I cleaned up the kitchen. And so I just walked in the kitchen and I said, hi, everybody. I would like to introduce you to some of my friends. This is Savage the Sink. Savage the Sink will not react kindly if dishes and food and just dirty things are left in it all night. This is Katie the Countertop. Katie the Countertop doesn't like it when she has to sit with dishes and food and things untidy all night. This is Timmy the Trash Can. Timmy the Trash Can likes for things to be thrown away into it.
And this has got like a VeggieTale theme going. You remember VeggieTales? This has got a book and a cartoon coming. I cannot wait, folks.
And this is Debbie the Dishwasher. Debbie the Dishwasher gladly accepts your dirty dishes every night. So I went ahead and had this conversation kind of in a humorous way, But just to say, hey, everybody, if it's not too much to ask, I would really love it if when I wake up tomorrow morning, if the countertop is clean and the sink is clean, just like it is right now. And guess what? I woke up this morning.
Survey says.
And the sink was clean and the countertops, for the most part, were clean. And so what I realize is my part to give is not to expect perfection. I can't have a longing of perfection, but I can express desire in my heart. And if I communicate this in advance before I'm frustrated about it, things go a lot better. Okay, so I think we've unpacked.
That's a big thing we want to note. Before I'm frustrated. We talked last time in the video that if I hold a beach ball underwater, it will come up like a grenade.
Yes.
It's like I'm stuffing it, and then boom.
And I did a little survey this week and on Instagram just yesterday, and I said, in a heated moment in your relationship, are you more likely to stuff or explode? We have a lot more stuffers, which means that we've got a lot of people.
Stuffers are just delayed exploders. Stuffers are delayed exploders. I'm sorry if they're not. Somebody needs to tell me about it. They'll explode, and maybe they'll be like the sniper behind the grassy knoll. Sometimes they explode in a way that's more passive aggressive, and they have a way to snipe, kind of be a sniper at you.
So the secret is, before that moment of conflict, to have some honest communication, but to do it in a way that you have already put some deposits in that person's bank account, what you notice they're doing right, what you see that they do really well, the longings that they do meet in your heart, reframing this rather than laying down expectations, which can be premeditated resentments or premeditated demands. Instead, say, these are some longings I have. Then we're going to divide those out. These are realistic. These are unrealistic. Even tucked within the unrealistic, how can we reframe it to get it more toward the realistic, but also give the other person a chance to express some of their longings and desires as well? That's a first sign, great sign of a relationship that's moving toward health. Number 2, healthy communication skills. Now, we've already referenced how important communication is and what we express with number 1. But last week you mentioned something that many people left a comment to that they would like a little more information about, and that is the healthy communications contract.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've said to you before, Jim, that feels so formal and stiff for a relationship. And you said, Lysa, you're bringing relationship contracts to the table with every relationship that you have. You have a relationship contract in your mind with your friends. You have a relationship contract in mind with your children. You have a relationship contract in mind with your spouse. And so help us know how to let that work for us and not against us.
And thank you for the question. I love how you just put that. What I look for especially there is there's not a relationship you can have, including with a pet, that does not have a contract. What I look for is often it's that real fine print in your contract, like you better not do this and you better come through this and those things, and we know them over here. And to give some grace to our friends or partners or kids or spouses, often we've never really thoroughly communicated. Let me tell you what I want in this relationship. I love the humor, how you went around the kitchen last night. We've not, and it's one of the 6 major tenets in the marital research, using some humor that is great for conflict and communication. We've never said, whether it's an expectation, desire, longing, expecting the other person to mind read. And remember what happened, I've said it last time, what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. Meaning if it's vague and no one knows, that's where it's going to stay. So to be able to communicate like in a healthy communications contract, you want me to speak to that for a minute?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So in the therapy world and in other worlds, in the ethical world, we have what we call beneficence and non-malfeasance. Don't worry about those words. It means do good, beneficence, come on. Ephesians 4:15, speak the truth in love, like agape love. Agape, seeking the other person's highest good. Beneficence, do good. Non-malfeasance is do no harm. So if I can get couples to say, can we stop if anybody, even in COVID-19, went to the emergency room with some issue, if they were bleeding, first thing they're going to do, an EMT is going to stop the bleeding. We've got to try to stop doing harm. As you go to approach anything, corny Jimism, I have a lot of them, say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean. We're already setting up the flavor, the milieu, the environment, the house we're inviting them to walk into, and it stinks in there. There's clutter, or it doesn't feel safe. So say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean. Now,
so is this the contract, or do you have a printed piece? Do you have a form? Because I think a lot of people are saying, do you have a form I can look at?
The form I do with people, that is the shell of the contract, what I'm saying. You've got to get the setting right, because if you don't, people they won't even do the contract. Specifics of the contract are very simple. I'll do this slowly, try to. I talk fast at times, obviously. One is time of day. When do we talk? And like I think touched on this last time, I don't want a conversation before 10 a.m. and I don't want one after 7 a.m. My brain's dead, or you said the Holy Spirit leaves the room. So in the contract, I have the couples I work with, or even with friendships of people, come up with the contract yourself. They mutually come together. This person on this side of the table says, here's what I need, here's what I don't need. The other person says the same. What time of day, and then honor that. And I have them write it down. So folks, you write your own contract down. I don't want to engage in, now we're talking about critical or difficult conversations. We're not saying, you want a cup of coffee, babe? We're talking about difficult conversations over finances, or the kids, or something else, repair in the yard, or something. Talk about that, not before this hour, not after that. Then
okay, so the first part is to identify what time of day is best for both of you to come together and talk. I think this is really important.
That takes compromise, because the person says, well, I just love getting up at 6 a.m. Zippity-doo-dah, I'm wide awake. I'm like, don't do that. So, we have to you have to negotiate. Some people go, man, I'm like Dracula at night. Whoop, I'm wide awake at 10 o'clock. Let's go deep. No, I want to go to deep sleep. That's where I want to go. So they have to negotiate that and honor where the other person is. Time of day, that's part of the contract, getting that settled.
Okay, and so after time of day, is it a place? Because I remember you saying one time, don't have these hard conversations in your bedroom, because your bedroom should be a place of sanctuary and sleep.
Sleeping, serenity, and sex, I say. So during COVID-19, I'm a realist. There are people that I'm having to do counseling sessions with, all on video, and that's the only place they have. So there are always caveats. But basically, because that's the place to be intimate, to relax, to have serenity, to rest and sleep, and then we're bringing the tense energy. So place is important, and that's where not to have it. Now go proactive, find a place to have it. People have gone to IKEA or Goodwill. I don't care where they go, and they got a couple of chairs or a little tiny love seat, or they designate, even in a smaller house, this is conversation corner. We go here, and the brain remembers when we go here, we can talk about anything, and we certainly can talk about conflict here. So the space is important. Time of day, space is important.
Okay, and is there anything else in the contract that we need to know? Because I've got mean what you say, or say what you mean.
Mean what you say.
Mean what you say what you mean, but don't say it mean.
And I put not but, because the brain's wired to tune you out after the but. Say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean. Every house, everyone listening today, somebody putting the symbols down there, an ampersand, the and sign. That and will change your life, because the brain's wired to tune you out when you say but. So to say and, the ampersand is important. That's important to frame it up. Time of day, we had talked about last time, blood sugar, all like that. We put this, write it down on the contract. Now, we also talk about, it's hard with this one because I work with so many couples where they first, before we do this, have gone through what you went through. You admitted this, the trauma egg. They've gone through their life story to look at FIT, facts, this happened to me, I, impact, what did it do to me, track, what track have I taken. We are often, as the Native American said, don't judge another Native American until you've walked a mile in her moccasins. So we are judging people there, and we like, where's this person in their story? So I want to put in this, try to get to know your spouse's story. Here's one quick caveat. Look at your spouse gently, or your good friend. Look at yourself. What did your family of origin teach you about communication, intimacy, conflict, how to do it? and conflict resolution. Just ponder and eat a good meal, get rested, and sit with your spouse. So we ought to sit sometime. That might be good to do with a therapist, and say, what was the framing, the lenses? What were these framed up? This is what dad taught us about in relationship. This is what mom taught us about conflict. Some of us, I would be in this case, we're in deep trouble because with kids more is caught than taught. And the little seminar I was presented growing up, there's not exactly a book in that. There might be a thriller book or a really bad novel. Think story, think family. What did this person, often you're expecting them to be able to, maybe you grew up in a home that was good with communication and you're expecting them to be on the same bandwidth, and they're like, you're speaking Chinese or Italian and they only know English. You got to look at, can they even understand you're a Mac and they're a PC? Nobody's doing anything wrong. They're just operating with the system they were trained in, right?
That's so good.
But that's important.
So Jim, do you have a resource that we could post that gives some of this healthy communication contract that we could provide for people? Okay, so
I will email that to you. I'll get it to you later today for sure, and then you can have it. And it's just the skeleton and the outline. Let me do a couple more. Don't weaponize anything. That means you don't bring up, well, you this and you that, or like you said back there, and then come up with the rules like no name calling. People say no cursing in the thing. Help seeking to understand. You want to put mirroring that, mirror back. What I hear you say is try to really clarify. I'll type that up. I've got it, but I'll type it up what we do. But remember, we let the couple come up with their own rules. We take our hands off and say, those are 3 or 4 guidelines. You come up with the rules that you want for your relationship. And then I help them negotiate, because often someone says, I want this rule in the relationship, in the contract. Well, I don't want that. And then that's where I try to help them work through that.
That is so great. Okay, we're going to go on to number 3. A lot of you are asking if I'm going to save this video so you can go back and watch it with someone later. Yes, this video will be saved, so don't worry about that. It'll be live here on my Instagram stories for 24 hours. And then I will also save the video and make it available to you either through my feed, or I'll let you know where you can access this video. So don't panic if you've missed a couple of points. You will be able to go back and watch it today for 24 hours and then later. Yes.
Let me speak to one comment. They go by so quickly. And Lisa, you and I talked about this earlier this morning. Folks, the reality is, I see in the comments, I see it in my office a lot. Someone says, this is all good. Folks, this only works if it works. And that is, you say, but my spouse won't go to counseling. They won't do a contract. Well, newsflash, they're in a contract, whether they sign or write down everybody has a contract. What do? Then, we have that great verse in Matthew 18, the church discipline passage. Then you go to them. If they don't listen, you try to get 2 to 3 witnesses. If not, take it to the church. That's a concept that can work to say, you know what, then I'm going to go to therapy on my own, or I'm going to find a trusted friend or a pastor or somebody and go talk about this on my own, because there are all kinds of people going, counseling is a joke. Counseling is they're just making money. It's stupid. And I won't go to counseling. Who does a contract? Mom and dad never did that. This is crazy. So that piece is, you do your own emotional self-regulation and self-care and get healthy yourself. And you don't have to show up to every drama you're invited to. You do what you can. We can come back and talk about that later. But folks, some things are hard. The other person won't cooperate. Remember, with, operate, to operate with, cooperate. They're not going to do it. That's tough.
Yeah, it is. And we fully acknowledge that. But I do think it is important, even if your spouse won't cooperate, that you go ahead and meet with a counselor. Find a trusted friend, or even a lay counselor at your church, or someone that you can go and process and start your own work. And again, if you need a good resource for that, that is easily accessible today, go to the Proverbs 31 Ministries podcast and go to our therapy and theology series, and you're going to find a lot of amazing help to get you started, even some books and recommendations that we have for you there. Okay, number 3, Jim, is a forgiveness plan. So in our work that you and I have done, I've had to do a lot of work around forgiveness, and I took what you and I started And I've done over 1,000 hours of study about forgiveness from the Bible. So forgiveness is crucial. And let me go ahead and give a couple of things that I've learned in having a forgiveness plan that I think are very important. And again, I have a book coming out in November called Forgiving What You Can't Forget.
Yes.
I am really excited about this resource. This is the book I never wanted to have to write. I can find myself being very resistant to forgiveness. I'm just having confession here. I oftentimes will ask the question, when do I have to forgive? And then when I'm asking that question, what I really mean is it's too soon for me to forgive. But then one day I wake up and say it's too late to forgive. And so there never seemed to be this right time for forgiveness. And what you helped me see is that pursuing health in a relationship, forgiveness should be one of the first steps, not one of the last steps. And also I want to say about forgiveness, it's not another cruel expectation to put on yourself, or that God is demanding from you, the one that's hurt. Really,
Right.
it's putting a stake in the ground and saying, I've suffered long enough from what other people have done to me. And forgiveness is the step I can take. I don't have to have the other person cooperate in any way, actually. Forgiveness is the step I take to start my healing and to unhitch my pain from what I can't control another person doing. I can't control that another person's ever going to say they're sorry. I can't control that another person is ever going to see my side. I
That's right.
can't even control that another person's ever going to acknowledge how I was hurt. But I
That's
can
true.
unhitch myself from the control of their choices and say forgiveness is something that God has provided for my health and for my healing. And what forgiveness is sweeping my heart clean of further damaging emotions of bitterness, resentments, anger, rage, all of that. Because my heart is too beautiful of a place to carry all of those heavy emotions. I've been hurt enough. It's time now that I forgive. And forgiveness is not necessarily made possible because I've determined that I'm going to grit my teeth and forgive you. Forgiveness is not made possible by my determination. It is my cooperation with what God has already given me and what Jesus already modeled. And so let me just give a couple of insights about having a forgiveness plan inside a marriage relationship. We need to recognize, and Jim, you've taught me this, that forgiveness is two parts. I need to forgive for the fact of what happened to me. And so when I forgive for the fact of what happened to me, I literally say, I forgive you for this specific thing that hurt me. And that's part one. That's the decision of forgiveness. But forgiveness is also a process. And the process is that fact, whatever it was that hurt me, it cost me something.
Yes,
the Bible even calls, we must forgive those who create debts. You know, it's an emotional debt when someone hurts me. It's cost me something. And depending on the amount that's cost me, there will be an impact attached to it. So even after I make the decision to forgive for the fact of what happened, later on, I'm probably going to get triggered when I'm reminded of how much this cost me. I'll have anxiety or I'll have frustration, and I'll start to feel like a forgiveness failure. But what you've taught me, Jim, is that no, that's not a sign that my forgiveness decision didn't take place. It just means I've entered the process of forgiveness, that now I need to stop and say, oh, this is an impact. This is a reminder of how much this cost me. So now I need to stop and say, and now I forgive for the impact that this had on me. And then you also taught me to add this little sentence in that gets right at the heart of what makes forgiveness possible. I will say, and whatever my feelings will not yet allow for, the blood of Jesus will surely cover.
Yes.
Because sometimes my feelings are the last thing to sign on to forgiveness.
That's right.
But I can take a step of forgiveness, acknowledge that my feelings haven't caught up with it yet. And remember, feelings are supposed to be indicators, not dictators. They can indicate there's more to be worked through, but they shouldn't dictate that I don't step into this healing process of forgiveness. And so I add that little sentence: whatever my feelings will not yet allow for, the blood of Jesus will surely cover. In other words, that's not a hyper spiritual thing. It's just acknowledging that the cross matters. It's acknowledging that Jesus did work I could never do on my own. It's acknowledging that I need the blood of Jesus to cover my sins so that I can be forgiven. And to the extent that I receive Jesus's forgiveness, that's to the extent I'll be able to extend it to someone else. The last thing I'll say about forgiveness, and then I'll hush, is that forgiveness, having a forgiveness plan, which is a sign of health in our relationships, having a forgiveness plan is crucial, that we remember Jesus intended forgiveness to be part of our everyday process. It's not just for the hard and horrific in our life, but it's supposed to be something that we do first thing in the morning when we wake up. We make a plan in our own heart to start the forgiveness process. Jesus incorporated it from Matthew chapter 6 in his daily prayers. We receive in the prayer that when Jesus taught us to pray, give us today our daily bread. And then the rest is talking about forgiveness and confession. I acknowledge I need God's forgiveness, and then I'm going to go ahead and forgive those who will create a debt or offense with me. And so Jesus taught us to do it first thing in the morning. And then Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse 26, you can read this. It reminds us, don't go to bed and lay in your bed and let all that anger, bitterness, brawling, and slander sit on you. So it literally says, don't let the sun go down without resolving this and sweeping your heart clean. So forgiveness should be something part of our morning routine, part of our evening routine. And forgiveness is that process that we can go ahead and make a plan for health in our relationships because of forgiveness. So that's number 3.
I love that, Lysa. I really do. And I just have a little prop here, which you've seen many of before with me. You know, folks, you can get a stack of 3x5 cards. I like using these. And you can write down, I'm just using that. I'm assuming this is backwards. It's how it works on front-facing cameras. But that says fact and that says impact. So get a 3x5 card where you can write down, here's something of your whole life. Even without a partner, friend, spouse, here's what happened. That's the fact. Name it specifically, whatever that might be. And over here, one of the Greek words, aphiemi, in the New Testament means to cancel the debt. What is the debt? What's the impact? This is what it did to me. The fact, this is what happened. The impact is, what did it do to me? And write down my view of myself, of God, shame, my belief, my whatever. Write this down, what the impact is. And I do track, the T, F-I-T, my FIT principle. What track is, then you can take that to God. You might have a whole bunch of 3x5 cards by yourself to give to God and say, God, the impact of all this is what it did. See, we know on the cross, the impact of all of our sin, Jesus did not have what we call a trauma egg. He didn't have this life story full of trauma. He took our trauma egg on him on the cross. So he bore all of our sins. Like, imagine all the 3x5s all over Jesus with your name and my name and the sin. So to look, what was the impact? That's the impact of our sins real clearly, put him on the cross. So to look and say, what is the impact and what's the track? Forgiveness is a track to say, I choose to cancel the debt. And then there's an emotional forgiveness that will take time. It usually doesn't happen right away. You say, I really feel I've canceled the debt. Remember, it is unilateral. Reconciliation's bilateral. It takes 2. Please never confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. It's nice when they shake hands and work together, but forgiveness sets the prisoner free, only to realize the prisoner was me. I am not going to sit in bitterness, because that will harm. My unforgiveness will harm the container it's held in, me, more than it will harm you, who I think I'm holding it against. So that piece.
That's so good, Jim. Say that comment one more time. Forgiveness unforgiveness harms the container in
more than it does the person you're holding it against. Duke University, which is right up the street from where we live here, a couple hours, they did a study a number of years ago that found that the #1 killer in America was unforgiveness. They studied longitudinally people who said, all right, in the study, I will not forgive blah, blah, blah. And they studied them and all the manifestations in the body, all the disease, right? So it's kind of like unforgiveness is the COVID-19 of the soul, because COVID-19 is really not killing people. If you look at it, it's other conditions that are already there, or pneumonia. I'm not saying I'm trying to be medical here, but I'm saying we're finding a lot of with this COVID-19 thing, it's just the vehicle that's delivering death, and unforgiveness will do that. It will come out. Well, they had cancer, they had diabetes, they had some other issues that came up, and all that stressing of the body, what it does in unforgiveness and bitterness has massive physical side effects, massive.
Well, thank you for that, Jim. I know we've only got 10 minutes left. We've got one more to cover, which is a big one. So we've covered 3 signs of healthy relationships. It's not every sign of a healthy relationship, but we really want to point you toward health. But I also want to say one other thing. I know that forgiveness is much more complicated to work through than what we're able to accomplish right here. So Jim and I have been working on some forgiveness intensives that we want to do with you. Originally, before COVID-19, we were going to have them in person, but now we are working on doing some forgiveness intensives for individuals, forgiveness intensives for couples, because I truly feel like if you want to start pursuing health in a relationship, forgiveness is a beautiful place to start. So even if you want to do it individually or you want to do it as couples, we are going to be offering those online. There will be a cost for these because the value of them will be tremendous. And if you want more information about that, go ahead and send me a DM in my Instagram. So you can DM me. Go ahead and send me a DM. Make sure to include your name and your email address. We will collect those and make sure to reach out to you when we are ready to take registrations for that. Okay, let's go on to number 4. So we've covered number 1, freedom to express. We changed the word from expectations to longings, so freedom to express longings. Number 2, healthy communication skills. We talked about the healthy communications contract, which we're going to provide later for those of you who want to download that. We've talked about have a forgiveness plan. Number 4 is trust. Trust is the oxygen of emotional relationships. And I'll never forget when my youngest grandson was born. He's my only grandson, but it's my youngest grandchild. When he was born, the nurse walked in and gave us a lesson. I thought she was going to give us a lesson on how to change the diaper, how to hold the head properly, how to, tend to the baby soft spot. But actually, what the lesson revolved around is trust. And I thought it was such a beautiful thing for that to be the very first lesson that this nurse taught us about properly caring for this newborn baby, because she said trust is the oxygen through which human relationships survive. If you remove trust, the relationship will not be able to survive. Now, this is a hard statement because I know what it's like to have trust broken in a relationship, and I know how hard it is to repair trust. So I want to acknowledge right away that once trust has been broken in a relationship, small ways or big ways, it's hard to repair that, but it is possible. So Jim, we only have about 6 minutes left, which I know trust could be a week-long conversation.
Sure.
But what is some of your best advice to really infusing your relationship with trust or rebuilding trust that's been broken?
Well, again, we've talked about this before, and certainly in therapy and theology, but trust is built over 2 roads. Time always moves on, okay? Time plus provable behavior. So you watch, you can see, does the person seem like they've changed, not just a little bit for 3 weeks, but again, longitudinally over a longer period of time. So that's how trust is rebuilt. It can come down like the Twin Towers in 9/11, right? But it's rebuilt like we're facing in COVID-19. When do we reopen? How do we reopen? How do we rebuild trust? How do we, that's, so 9/11, the difference, 9/11, the towers were down fast. COVID's come on, but in 9/11, we started rebuilding pretty fast, and we were not doing social distancing, were we? It's not the best comparison. COVID-19, 9/11. So with COVID-19, we're all making it up as we go. How do we rebuild? So that's kind of a paradigm. We look at also the idea of trust being, whether you say it's earned, it's going to take some time, not just for you to trust the other person, but for you to trust yourself. I hear it time and time again, a person say, how do you know I'm not being a fool here, Jim? How do you know I'm not just trusting or what Brene Brown calls hijacking or hot wiring a connection real fast that's fake? No, it's going to take time to, so time is always implied. And may I just say too, give yourself permission to go forward and then back with building trust. And sometimes with post-traumatic stress, it doesn't mean the friend or spouse has betrayed you again. You might have had a dream in the middle of the night or something on TV or the news, or a friend calls, says, my person did so-and-so, and you're in that trigger. Nothing new has happened with this person. So remember, part of that PTSD, so to speak, will always be there, I think, in trust rebuilding.
And I think one of the most helpful things that you've shared with me and with Art is if I get triggered and I worry, and so, you know, I'm on shaky ground and I'm not sure, you know, is what I'm seeing what I'm really seeing, or is this past trauma speaking, or whatever. One of the most helpful things you've taught Art to do when I go to him and I say, I'm afraid, I want to know that I'm safe. I'm trying to see if there's believable behavior here. One of the best things that Art does, and you've taught him to do this, is to say, of course you're afraid. Of course you need to check in. And if he gets defensive and says, not this again, whatever, then it actually diminishes the trust that we are trying to build. But if I go to him and he's tender and he's open-hearted, he's kind, he has something to give to me in saying, you know, of course, you know, share with me what you're thinking, or let's process this. And one of the best questions he'll say is, do you need to talk about this? Or do you just need me to give you a hug and tell you it's fine? Tell you that you're safe. All of those things are helpful. Again, Instagram's going to cut us off, so we only have a couple of minutes left. Jim, is there any last statement about trust? I love what you said. Trust is built time plus believable behavior. I think that's excellent. One last comment on trust.
I would say with this, be aware of proactively building trust on both sides. Trusting yourself, self-talk, what we call emotional self-regulation. Speak to yourself and say, I'm not crazy. This could be just a bad memory or post-traumatic stress. And then to be active in saying, I want to literally give the person who's harmed me a chance, especially if they've repented of it, confessed it, asked for forgiveness. I want to, for every rip, there's a repair. In trust rebuilding, you get more rips and you don't repair, then that is going to organically keep trust from being rebuilt. Circle back with each other and say, can we talk? And if you don't know it's bothering me, don't make me read your mind. Honey, this is bothering me. I want to talk about this. Keep short accounts. Remember from Ephesians, if you don't do that and you go to bed, you're going to give the devil a foothold. You're giving Satan a foothold to get a hold of you. Not good. So repair every little breach that you can and learn to trust yourself as well as trying to trust the other person.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most helpful things to remember with all that we've talked about today, we've talked about freedom to express longings. We changed the word from expectations to longings, number one. Number two, healthy communication skills. Number three, have a forgiveness plan. Number four, look for ways to build trust. Trust is the oxygen of relationships. And I think one of the most important things to remember in all of this is we have an enemy, but it's not each other.
That is true.
And oftentimes when Art and I working on something, he will remind me or I will remind him, we have an enemy, but it's not you. We have an enemy, but it's not me. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I pray that you have found this very helpful. Jim, people can find you at jimkress.com, CRESS. People can find me at lysaterkeurst.com, and certainly check out Proverbs 31 Ministries and our Therapy and Theology series. It's great to spend a Saturday morning with you. We will do this again. Yes?
Yes, and this will be in the archive. I see the comments. This will be in your archive. I put it on my Facebook page too. So the whole video and last week's is there too, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they can go search for that, check Lisa's page, and it's on my Facebook page. Thanks.